Hello, audience. I just got back from the 2024 Model T Ford Club of America National Tour, which was in the San Diego area this year, and I took the truck. I drove this all the way there, drove it on every day of the tour, and drove it all the way back, and surprisingly, didn't have that many problems with it. I haven't said anything about this event up to now because even though I registered for it way back in February, I wasn't entirely sure if I was even going to be able to make it until about a week before it started. My original plan was to take this, my 1913 touring car project, and yeah, in about 4 months there was no way I was going to finish this car, but I could get it reassembled, get the engine back together, get the chassis sorted out, get floors in it, a windshield, a seat, and get it drivable. And if I had absolutely nothing else to do in that time, that probably would have happened. But I spent that time mostly earning a living and working on other people's cars and just ran out of time. I didn't lose hope though. During that time I was buying parts for this like crazy. I got a bunch of bolt kits for it, I got new glass for the windshield. I tried getting the engine assembled soon enough, but eventually even I had to admit, you can't do everything. So I made the last minute decision to drive this instead, because it was between doing that or just canceling it, and I didn't want to do that. Now that made some sense, because this already has a windshield, it has a top, it has working lights, an electrical system, and the tires are not falling apart. However, it's not really prepped for a road trip, so over about 4 days I had to make quite a few upgrades on it. I got the Model T Ford Club of America inspection sheet, I went over it, added bolts where there should be bolts, added cotter pins where there should be cotter pins, and a few other things. So, among the many things I did with this, one thing I did was work on the wiring. Now, the ignition and charging system, that was all new wiring, but everything else on this was kind of shoddy. There were a bunch of loose wires tied off that went nowhere, and the wiring for the lights wasn't that great, so I have all new wiring going to each light. It's not configured the way I want it permanently, but it works for now, and it's a lot better than it was. I found a 6-volt electric horn at a swap meet for $5. On the engine that's in the touring car, that had a Z head on it, which I'm not going to use anymore because I got the original head for it. So I transferred it over to here, which is what you see. It's not the kind of thing you just want to throw on an old engine you don't know anything about, but I did it anyway, and so far I haven't had any problems. Added new spark plug wires, as the old ones looked kind of bad. I also got a GPS speedometer. I got this off Amazon for about 20 bucks. Since I already have a 12-volt converter running the ignition, I just wired it into that. So, I turn the ignition on, and it works. It tells us the speed and general direction. For extra luggage capacity, I got this steamer trunk for free and bolted it to the bed, and it works pretty good. Mostly because it looks like decoration. It doesn't really look like anything of value is being stored in it, so that worked really well. I have a spare tire for this, but I've never really had a permanent location for it, so I never really carried it. This time, I just bolted it to the bed. And luckily I never needed it. Now, the closest thing I had to a breakdown, which arguably may actually be a breakdown because I actually had to stop the car to fix it, was the generator cutout melted. This is a cheap $15 universal one that I got off eBay some time ago. And I didn't have an extra one, so I had to just run it on battery for a while. And then somebody loaned me a good working cutout, which is what's on here now. Now, even though this is kind of a cheap item, it did last almost a year, so I got my money's worth out of it. Mechanically, we didn't really have any problems with this. I thought for sure I was probably going to lose a rod bearing or maybe even break the crankshaft or something, but surprisingly not. I drained the oil afterwards and it was clean, no chunks of Babbitt in it or anything like that. But we did have a few problems. Now the top, is just falling apart. I didn't do the greatest job making it, and the weather's taken its toll on it, and the wind from high-speed driving. Every day I added a little more duct tape to it to try and hold it together, but it needs to be replaced. Luckily, I have some ideas on how to make a better one, and I'll start on that sometime. The radiator is also a problem. It was falling apart when I left, and on the drive, the tank has pretty much completely detached from the frame on it, and it's leaking pretty bad. Another thing that happened is the floorboards warped from the heat, so they don't quite sit properly anymore. They weren't in the greatest condition before the trip, and I needed to make new ones for it anyway, so that's not really a loss. Another thing I discovered is above 40 miles per hour, these two boards like to fly out and get tangled up in the pedals. So I'm going to have to work out a way to prevent that. One problem I did expect, but it never really happened, was overheating. Because this has overheated randomly in the past for seemingly no reason. And this trip was going to be in excess of 90-degree weather. We're going to be going up and down really steep hills, which was all true. But it never really did run hot. Now, I even prepared for it. I got a cheap aftermarket electric fan that I was ready to throw on at a moment's notice, but never needed it. One thing I didn't notice until taking this trip was putting a coolant temp gauge right on top of the radiator is absolute genius, because you can monitor the coolant temperature without taking your eyes off the road. And on those winding mountain roads, that really does make a difference. Driving there on the highway, I averaged about 39 miles per hour. I saw that number on the gauge more than anything else. Now, there were a few sections where I had to get on the freeway for a few miles, which was fun. Now, in overdrive, it could average about 48, 49 miles per hour. Now, at wide open throttle on flat ground, it can get upwards around 55, but that was really pushing it, which I didn't want to do. The problem is, you can only gear it so high before it just doesn't have enough torque multiplication to pull the car, and in overdrive it's pretty close to that. Now, driving this on the freeway was quite a unique experience, because on one hand, obviously I was going way too slow, I was in everyone's way and under constant fear of getting run over, but on the other hand, I was already going a lot faster than I wanted to go in a Model T. So yeah, I was going too fast and too slow all at the same time. So in addition to making it there, going on the tour, and making it back with very few problems, I also won the award for driving the furthest to get to the tour in a Model T. Granted, driving from LA to San Diego is not exactly the most ambitious road trip ever, even in a Model T, but still, it counts as a win. Well, I've added quite a bit to the list of things that need to be repaired on this. However, I do have a new sense of enthusiasm for this, as I've proven that I can drive this on long-distance tours if I want to. I don't think I'm going to drive it anymore until after I replace the radiator, which I'm not sure when I'll get around to, but you'll probably see it in a future video. But anyway, that's it for now. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.